I never expected that a small act of kindness in the frozen foods aisle would split my life into two clean halves, the before and the after. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The kind that feels colorless. My husband Daniel had left for a minute business meeting that morning. He kissed my forehead absent-mindedly, his phone already in his hand. I remember watching him through the kitchen window as he backed out of the driveway. He didn't look back. I went to the grocery store because the house felt too quiet. Too still. I told myself I needed milk, bread, and laundry detergent. The truth was I needed noise. I needed the hum of other lives around me. That's when I saw her. She was standing in front of the cashier, digging through her purse. Her hands were shaking. The cashier's voice was impatient but controlled. The line behind her was growing restless. I noticed the way her shoulders curled inward, like she was trying to make herself disappear. "I'm sorry," she kept whispering. I thought I had enough. She didn't. I don't know what made me step forward. Maybe it was the way her eyes glistened with humiliation. Maybe it was the way the people behind her sighed loudly, as if her struggle was an inconvenience to their schedules. "I'll cover it," I said. She turned to me slowly. Her eyes were an unusual gray, almost silver. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then she nodded. "Thank you," she said softly. It wasn't a large bill, just groceries, bread, canned soup, diapers. I tapped my card and smiled at her like it was nothing. But the way she looked at me afterward made it feel like something. Outside, the air was cold. Snow had fallen the night before, and the parking lot was lined with white ridges where cars had me out. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "It's okay," I replied. "We all need help sometimes." She studied my face carefully, like she was memorizing it. "Are you married?" she asked suddenly. The question startled me. "Yes." She looked down at the snow near our feet. "When your husband leaves," she said quietly, "don't touch the snow in your yard." I laughed awkwardly. "What?" She met my eyes again. There was no humor in hers. "Just don't." Before I could respond, she turned and walked away, her boots crunching against the ice. I stood there longer than I should have, watching her disappear between the cars. Her words followed me home. "When your husband leaves, don't touch the snow in your yard." It was absurd. Dramatic, cryptic. I told myself she was unstable. Or maybe grateful in a strange way. Maybe it was some metaphor. But that night, as I lay in bed alone, her voice replayed in my head. Daniel didn't come home until after midnight. He smelled like cologne I didn't recognize. Sweeter. Sharper. "Long meeting," he muttered, slipping into bed without meeting my eyes. I almost told him about the woman. I didn't. The next morning, snow still covered our front yard, untouched except for the narrow path Daniel had shoveled from the driveway to the door before leaving again. I watched him go. And then I stood at the window. "Don't touch the snow." It was grabbed my coat anyway. The cold air hit my face sharply as I stepped outside. The yard looked peaceful, smooth, white, innocent. I don't know what I expected to see. At first nothing seemed wrong. Then I noticed it. Near the side of the house close to the fence, the snow looked slightly uneven. As if something had disturbed it and then tried to smooth it back out. My heart began to pound. "You're being paranoid," I told myself. But I walked toward it anyway. Each step felt heavier. When I reached the patch, I hesitated. My gloves trembled as I crouched down. "Don't touch the snow." I brushed my fingers across the surface. Beneath the thin layer was something solid. Not earth, not grass, plastic. My breath caught in my throat. I cleared more snow away. It was a small black bag, partially buried. My hands shook so badly I almost couldn't pull it free. I looked around the empty street. No one was watching. I brought the bag inside. For several seconds, I just stared at it on the kitchen table. Then I opened it. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. Daniel, and another woman. They were at a restaurant, a hotel lobby, a beach. In one photo he was kissing her forehead the same way he used to kiss mine. The dates on the back of the pictures went back 8 months. 8 months. My knees gave out and I sank to the floor. There were also printed bank statements, withdrawals I didn't recognize, hotel charges, jewelry purchases, and one envelope. Inside was a copy of a lease agreement. Daniel's name, and hers, for an apartment 20 minutes away. My vision blurred, the room felt like it was spinning. 8 months. 8 months of lies. 8 months of late meetings, client dinners, business trips, the woman at the grocery store. How did she know? Was she the other woman? No. The woman in the photographs was younger. Dark hair, bright smile. The woman from the store had gray eyes and tired hands. Who was she? My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Running late again tonight. I stared at the words until they felt meaningless. That evening I drove to the address on the lease. My hands were steady now. Numb. The building was small but modern. I parked across the street. At 7:43 p.m., Daniel's car pulled in. I watched him step out, straightening his coat. He looked happy. He walked toward the entrance and buzzed. A few seconds later the door opened. She stepped into view. The woman from the photographs. She threw her arms around him. And he kissed her. Not quickly, not guiltily. Comfortably, like home. Something inside me broke silently. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply watched until they disappeared inside. Then I drove home. That night, I laid the photographs across the dining table. When Daniel came in, I was waiting. He froze when he saw them. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Where did you get those? He finally asked. The question felt almost amusing. That's what you're worried about. His face hardened. It's not what you think. I laughed. A sharp, broken sound. It's exactly what I think. He ran a hand through his hair. It just happened. 8 months just happened. You were going to leave me. I said quietly. He didn't answer. Silence is an answer. When? I asked. He hesitated. Soon. The word echoed like a gunshot. I thought of the woman in the store. When your husband leaves, he had already left. He just hadn't told me yet. Get out, I whispered. Get out of my house. It's my house too. I stared at him. Not anymore. For the first time, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Fear. He left that night with a suitcase. And I sat alone at the table until morning. The next day, I went back to the grocery store. I didn't know why. Maybe I hoped she would be there. She was, standing by the entrance this time. As if waiting. When she saw me, she nodded. You found it. It wasn't a question. Yes. She exhaled slowly. I wasn't sure if you would listen. Who are you? I demanded. She held my gaze. I'm the wife before you. The world tilted. What? He left me the same way, she said softly. Same lies, same apartment, same promises. My chest tightened. I didn't know, I whispered. I know. Tears filled her eyes. But she didn't let them fall. I found out too late. It made me feel crazy. I saw him burying bag in your yard 2 nights ago. I remembered. He had gone outside after dinner. Said he needed fresh air. I followed him, she continued. I wanted to see who he chose this time. Why warn me? She gave a sad smile. Because no one warned me. I felt something unexpected then. Not just anger, but solidarity. 2 women tied together by the same betrayal. He won't change, she said gently. I know. Weeks passed. Daniel tried to call too plain, to justify. I didn't answer. I filed for divorce. The apartment lease became evidence. The bank statements too. He hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. He had drained our savings. When the legal letter started arriving, his confidence cracked. He hadn't expected me to fight. But I did. And every time I felt myself weakening, I remembered the snow. The smooth white surface hiding something ugly underneath. It was almost poetic. I often think about how close I came to never knowing. If I hadn't gone to the store that day. If I hadn't stepped forward. If I hadn't touched the snow. Kindness exposed the truth. Not suspicion, not confrontation. Kindness. The woman, her name was Elise, and I meet sometimes now. Coffee, quiet conversations. We don't talk about him much. He's not the center of the story anymore. The day the divorce was finalized, it snowed again. I stood in my yard alone. The world looked clean, fresh. This time, I stepped into the snow without fear. I didn't look for anything beneath it. Because now I understood something I hadn't before. Sometimes the warning isn't about danger. It's about awakening. And sometimes, the stranger you help is the one who helps you survive. My life didn't shatter that day. It cracked open. And from the pieces, I built something stronger. I helped a stranger at the grocery store. And she gave me back my future. The first night I slept alone in that house felt unfamiliar. Not because Daniel wasn't there, he had been emotionally absent for months. But because the silence no longer felt temporary. It felt permanent. The bed seemed larger, colder. Every sound echoed differently, like the walls themselves understood that something had ended. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. The way he used to bring me coffee in bed during our first year of marriage. The way he'd squeeze my hand during movies. The way he promised, on our wedding day, that I would never have to question where I stood with him. I wondered when that promise had started to decay. Was it slow, gradual? Or had he woken up one morning already gone? The next few weeks were brutal. Not because I missed him, though sometimes I did. Or at least the version of him I thought I knew, but because betrayal has a strange aftershock. It makes you question your own instincts, your memory, your worth. I would catch myself wondering if I had been too distant, too focused on work, too tired, too predictable. Then I would remember the apartment lease. 8 months. 8 months is not a mistake, it's a decision. Elise and I began talking more often. At first, it was awkward. There's something fragile about two women connected by the same man. You don't know where the boundaries are. You don't know whether to grieve together or keep your distance. One afternoon, we sat at a quiet cafe near the edge of town. Snow was munting outside, dripping from the rooftops in steady rhythms. I used to blame myself, she admitted, stirring her coffee. He said I was too emotional, that I imagined things, that I pushed him away. I swallowed hard. He said similar things to me. She nodded slowly. That's his pattern. Pattern. The word settled heavily between us. Needs to feel admired, she continued. Needed when life becomes routine. He looks for someone new who sees him as extraordinary. I thought about the younger woman from the apartment. The bright smile, the way she threw her arms around him like he was a hero. I almost feel sorry for her, I whispered. Elise gave me a look that was both understanding and weary. I did too. Once, I didn't ask what happened after that. The divorce proceedings grew more intense. Daniel tried to negotiate, to soften the blow. To protect his image, he asked to meet in person. I agreed. We sat across from each other in a lawyer's office that smelled faintly of lemon disinfectant. He looked tired, less polished. The confidence he once carried so easily had thinned. You didn't have to humiliate me, he said quietly. I almost laughed. You humiliated yourself. His jaw tightened. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen? He hesitated. I was going to tell you. Eventually. After you moved into the apartment permanently. He didn't respond. I studied his face, searching for the man I loved. I couldn't find him. You buried evidence in our yard, I said softly. Do you understand how insane that sounds? His eyes flickered with something defensive. I panicked. I replied. You calculated. You thought if I never found out, you could control how this ended. He looked away. That was the moment I realized something important. I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I was done. When the settlement was finalized, I walked out of the courthouse feeling strangely light. Not happy. Not triumphant, free. The house felt different after that. I repainted the bedroom, moved the furniture, donated clothes that reminded me of him. I changed the locks. I even changed the scent of the laundry detergent. Small acts of reclamation. One evening, as I was sorting through old boxes in the attic, I found our wedding album. For a long time I just sat there staring at the cover. We looked so young. So certain. I opened it slowly, page after page of smiles, toasts, dancing, promises. Tears slipped down my face, but they weren't the same tears as before. They weren't sharp or suffocating. They were soft. Grief for something that once felt real. I closed the album and placed it back in the box. Some memories don't need to be destroyed. They just need to be archived. Spring arrived slowly. The snow finally melted completely, revealing patches of grass that had survived the cold. One morning I stepped outside barefoot. The ground was damp but alive. Birds were louder. The air felt different. I thought about the first time I touched the snow that winter. How terrified I had been. How unaware I was that uncovering that bag would set everything in motion. If Elise hadn't warned me, would I still be living in illusion? Would Daniel have left on his own terms, making me feel like I failed him? That possibility unsettled me more than the betrayal itself. A few weeks later, Elise invited me to her art show. I didn't even know she painted. The gallery was small but warm, filled with abstract canvases layered in blues and grays. Many of them had textured surfaces, thick strokes that looked almost like snowdrifts. One painting caught my attention immediately. It was a field of white with a faint black shape buried beneath the surface. I turned to her. "You painted this after?" She nodded. "It's called Beneath." I swallowed. "It's beautiful." She smiled gently. "Pain can create strange clarity." I stared at the painting longer. Before, I would have seen it as dark. Now I saw truth. Later that night, as I drove home, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. I almost ignored it. But something told me not to. It was from her, the younger woman. "I think you deserve to know the truth." My hands tightened around the steering wheel. Another truth. Haven't I had enough? I didn't respond immediately. The next day she called. Her voice was shaky. "He told me you were unstable," she said. "That you were controlling, that you refused to let him leave." The audacity made my chest burn. "He said you'd try to ruin him." I let out a slow breath. "And what do you think now?" Silence. Then, softly, "I think he lied to both of us." She told me he had already started pulling away from her too. Late nights, secretive phone calls. History repeating itself. "I found messages on his phone," she whispered. I closed mine else. There it was. The cycle. For a brief moment, I felt anger toward her. Then I remembered how Elise must have felt about me. And I chose differently. "I'm sorry," I said. She began crying. "I thought I was special." I understood that feeling too well. Weeks later, Daniel's third relationship collapsed publicly. Mutual friends stopped defending him. His charm no longer masked the pattern. And slowly, the narrative shifted. Not because I screamed or exposed him online, but because truth has a way of surfacing. One evening, I sat in my backyard. No snow this time. Just grass and fading sunlight. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Regret what?" "Touching the snow." I looked around the yard thoughtfully. "No," I said honestly. "It hurt, but not knowing would have hurt longer." She nodded. "I almost didn't tell you." "Why?" "I was afraid you'd think I was crazy." I smiled faintly. "I almost did." We both laughed. It felt good. Real. Months passed. I began rediscovering parts of myself that had quietly disappeared during my marriage. I signed up for a photography class. I traveled alone for the first time. I reconnected with friends I had slowly drifted from. One afternoon, while cleaning out the garage, I found the black bag. I had kept it, not as a reminder of him, but as proof of my awakening. I held it for a long time. Then I threw it away. I didn't need physical evidence anymore. The truth lived in me now. That winter had taken something from me. But it also gave me something unexpected. Discernment, strength, boundaries. And an understanding that betrayal is not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of someone else's inability to be honest. The next time it snowed, nearly a year later, I stood by the window again. The yard was smooth and white. Peaceful. This time there was no fear, no hidden bag, no secrets buried beneath the surface. I stepped outside slowly and let the snow fall on my hair. Cold clean. I knelt down and pressed my bare hand into it, not to search, just to feel. Sometimes, I think about that grocery store moment, how ordinary it seemed, how easily I could have stayed silent. Kindness feels small when you offer it. But sometimes, it sets off an avalanche of truth. I helped a stranger at the grocery store. She warned me about the snow. And because I listened, I didn't just uncover betrayal, I uncovered myself. For a long time after everything ended, I kept waiting for the grief to come back the way it had in the beginning. Sharp, suffocating, impossible to breathe through. But it didn't. What came instead were quieter waves. Moments that caught me off guard. Like the first time I went to a dinner party alone. It was at a colleague's house. Couples filled the living room, wine glasses in hand, laughter bouncing off the walls. For a second, I felt exposed. As if everyone could see the invisible label on my forehead left. But no one looked at me with pity. No one whispered. I realized something important that night. The shame I felt had never been mine. It had belonged to him. I had just been carrying it. When I got home, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and studied my reflection. My face looked the same. My eyes, maybe a little older. But there was something steadier in them. I wasn't someone who had been abandoned. I was someone who had been freed from someone incapable of loyalty. That shift changed everything. Daniel tried reaching out again months later. Not to reconcile, that door was permanently closed, but to explain himself in a way that painted him as misunderstood rather than manipulative. I was unhappy, he said over the phone one evening. We all get unhappy, I replied calmly. Not all of us choose betrayal. You don't understand the pressure I was under. I almost laughed. Pressure doesn't make someone lie for 8 months. He was quiet. Then he said something that confirmed everything. You used to look at me like I was extraordinary. There it was, the addiction. Not love. Not partnership. Admiration. You wanted worship. I said softly. Not a wife. He didn't do that call. I blocked his number. Closure isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's as simple as choosing silence. Elise and I grew closer over time, but not in a way defined by him. Our friendship became about shared resilience rather than shared trauma. We started a small weekend ritual, Saturday morning walks through the park. One morning, as we walked past a frozen pond, she stopped suddenly. Do you ever think about the version of yourself who didn't know? She asked. I did. That woman had been softer. More trusting. Slightly naive. I don't hate her, I said thoughtfully. She laughed fully. Ellie smiled. That's not weakness, no, I agreed. It's courage. We stood there quietly, watching children slide across the ice. Life kept moving. And so did we. A year after the divorce, I received an unexpected letter in the mail. It wasn't from Daniel. It was from his mother. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. She apologized, not for his behavior. She didn't try to excuse him, but for the silence she maintained when she suspected something was wrong. She admitted she had seen signs. Late-night phone calls. Evasive answers. I raised him to be better than this, she wrote. I am sorry he failed you. The letter surprised me, not because it changed anything, but because it reminded me that betrayal rarely exists in isolation. It echoes outward, touching people who didn't ask to be involved. I didn't respond. But I forgave her quietly. Forgiveness became something I practiced often, not for others, I forgave myself for ignoring my instincts when Daniel started guarding his phone more closely. I forgave myself for believing his explanations when the bank statements looked strange. I forgave myself for wanting my marriage to work so badly that I accepted half-truths. There's a subtle cruelty in self-blame. It keeps you tied to the past longer than necessary. One evening, almost 18 months after that day in the grocery store, I hosted a small gathering at my house. Friends filled the living room, music played softly. The house felt alive in a way it never had before. At some point, I stepped outside for air. The yard was calm, illuminated by soft patio lights. I looked at the exact spot where I had uncovered the bag. It seemed smaller now. Less significant. Funny how trauma shrinks when you outgrow it. Elise joined me outside. You've changed, she said gently. I know, you're lighter. I thought about that. I stopped carrying what wasn't mine. She squeezed my hand. I'm glad I warned you. I turned to her. I'm glad I listened. We stood there quietly. Snow began falling again, soft, almost hesitant flakes. This time, it didn't feel like a symbol of hidden truths. It felt like renewal. Later that night, after everyone left, I cleaned up slowly. The house was quiet again, but not lonely. There's a difference. Loneliness feels empty, solitude feels peaceful. As I washed the last wine glass, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number again. For a split second, my heart skipped an old reflex. But it wasn't him. It was someone from my photography class asking if I wanted to collaborate on a project. I smiled. New connections. New beginnings. Months later, that collaboration turned into something more. His name was Aaron. He was patient. Not flashy. Not demanding. He didn't try to impress me constantly. He simply showed up. Consistency felt unfamiliar at first. I found myself waiting for hidden signs, for contradictions, for buried bags beneath metaphorical snow. But there weren't any. One evening, as we walked through my yard after dinner, he paused. "You love this place," he said. "I fought to keep it," I replied. He nodded thoughtfully. I didn't tell him the whole story immediately. Trauma doesn't need to be your introduction. But eventually I did. When I finished explaining the warning, the snow, the bag, he was quiet for a long moment. "Do you regret helping her?" he asked. "No," I said without hesitation. Even knowing what it led to. "Yes." He looked at me curiously. "Why?" "Because truth is better than comfort built on lies." He smiled softly. "That's not rare," I corrected gently. "Just painful." The first time Aaron stayed overnight during winter, it snowed again. We woke up early. The world outside was covered in white. He pulled back the curtain. "It looks untouched," he said. I joined him at the window. Untouched. I stepped outside bathe again just like the year before. The snow was cold against my skin, but I didn't flinch. Aaron followed, laughing at my recklessness. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Making peace," I said. I knelt down and scooped up a handful of snow. There was nothing beneath it. Just earth. Just ground. Just truth. I realized then that the warning had never really been about snow. It had been about awareness. About paying attention to subtle shifts. About trusting the discomfort you can't quite explain. If Elise hadn't spoken to me, Daniel would have left on his own carefully crafted timeline. He would have rewritten the narrative. I would have questioned myself for years. Instead, I faced the truth head on. Painful, humiliating, but honest. And honesty gave me power. Sometimes I think about the chain reaction that started in that grocery store line. If I hadn't stepped forward, if I hadn't paid, if she hadn't chosen to warn me. How many women stay in illusions because no one tells them to look beneath the surface? Kindness doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like paying for someone's groceries. Sometimes it looks like whispering a warning. Sometimes it looks like believing the whisper. I don't hate Daniel anymore. I don't even think about him often. He was a chapter. Not the whole story. And the snow. It still falls every winter. But now when I see it, I don't feel fear. I feel gratitude. Because beneath that cold, quiet surface, I once found the truth that set me free.